Hey guys, welcome to this week's episode of Boss Ladies Connect. We are continuing our friendship series. Um, Last time we talked about whether you are a sidekick or a superhero. Go check out that episode. It's episode 196, where we get into how you identify your friendships and your relationships and making sure that you're actually understanding how the individual is showing up in your life, right? But today we are going to talk a little bit more about authenticity and self-awareness. So this whole series is has been brought to life because of a book that I have been reading. I read actually like a year and some change ago. It's called All My Friends Have Issues by Amanda Anderson. And it was a really, really good book. It opened up the world of friendship to me in a different kind of way. And I read it, and you know what? It has been more than a year ago. It has been like 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago that I actually read this book. But and then I got the actual hard copy a year ago. I listened to the Audible about 4 or 5 years ago. So, and it came in a real pivotal moment in my life when I was just dealing with a lot of friend issues. And it just seemed to be on like a pattern of repeat. And so I was really searching for like wisdom and understanding around this space. And she gave me that. She gave me that. I gotta have her on as a guest one day. I gotta reach out to her and see if she'd be willing to come on. But for today, we are actually going to be talking about authenticity and self-awareness. And I want to read some things that Amanda has written in this book and kind of talk about it, because I think it's valuable information to know. And so she breaks things up into a couple of categories, right? So she'll do like a synopsis of the main chapter and of the chapter and what that main issue is, and then she'll do like a deal breaker, like what is the deal breaker in this space. So what I do love about this book is towards the back of the book is the reader's guide, which is what I am looking at. And the reader's guide kind of summarizes the chapters. So this is chapter 2. It's called Nuts and Gifts, Authenticity and Self-Awareness. So it reads, for the main issue: if we want to be a safe friend and thereby make friends with safe people, safe awareness is key. Being willing to share authentically what we know about ourselves is also critical. Add to this a willingness to examine the underlying source of our issues, and we have the potential for remarkable relationships. You don't have to share your big issues on the first 3 get-togethers. Y'all know I call that vomiting, when people vomit on you, all these things, and you're just like, I wanted to get to know you, but now I feel like I know you too much. And I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed, right? Yeah, so you don't have to share your big issues on the first 3 get-togethers. Instead, cultivate a willingness to ask questions, listen carefully, and cover one another's sins with love, right? So I love this part because I think this is so true. I have sometimes struggled. I won't say that I vomit on people with like deep insecurities or anything like that, but I genuinely I have to like work on my filter of information I give. What I find myself, like, I'm going self-aware now. What I find that I will do is, like, if you ask me a question, I will give you all the information I have about that question. And sometimes I don't need to give you all of the information, right? Sometimes we need to establish trust. Sometimes just because you ask me a question doesn't mean that you've earned the right to get the answer, right? Or to get the fullness of me in that answer. Because I've experienced in the past when people haven't really earned that right, we haven't really built up that trust, that comes and slaps you in the face again, right? So you're sharing like these things and this information because someone asked you, and you consider yourself to be an honest person, you don't want to keep things from them, you share all of this, but it may be too much for that person to handle. They may not be a trustworthy person. It may not be a safe space. And then now all of your stuff and your business is out there. And that is something that I still do. I don't do it as much, but I still do struggle with it because it's just in my nature to give you all of the information, right? So now the section that says the deal breaker issue, it reads, if a friend can't acknowledge that she has an issue and remains in a defense, prideful, or dishonest posture as the friendship progresses over the course of several months or years, accept that deep intimacy isn't possible at this time. I'm not talking about sunglass placement or parking preferences, but larger issues of character, such as honesty, self-awareness, wisdom, and the ability to admit hurtful behaviors. Not being able to acknowledge imperfections is more damaging to a relationship than the imperfection itself. And you should take it as a warning sign that it is, or take it as the warning sign that it is. Listen, I want to just sit here and like breathe, take a breath in, take a deep breath out. Self-awareness is not only key for you, self-awareness is key for your friends. It's key for your friends and your relationships. It is going to be extremely difficult to show up authentically when someone else isn't showing up authentically. It's going to be extremely difficult to be transparent, to be vulnerable, to be honest when someone else is not doing that. And I feel like it's dangerous, right? I feel like it's dangerous for you. You're putting yourself out there, you're sharing your stuff. And if that person is unwilling or just even very unaware and of the fact that they're not fully showing up, right? Because we all grow at different paces, right? So somebody, you just may not be at that place yet where you've grown or you discovered that thing about yourself, but it's like glaring to me. And if I bring that glaring thing up to you and you're not at a place where you're willing to accept that, or you're not a place where you see that for yourself, then there is, and if it's like a deal breaker, right? We're not talking about like, girl, you always trying to get the parking space over here, or you always trying to, wear your hair like this. Like, we're not talking about surface level things, but we're talking about like character things. We're talking about important things, right? You got to pay attention to it. Now, this, like, as I'm reading this, I'm listening to it, it sounds like, oh yeah, of course, makes sense. But when you're like engaged in a friendship and you have times where you have fun, you're laughing, you're hanging out, you're getting together, especially if you haven't been in that space for a while, or you come from a situation where you haven't had the best dynamics with friendships, you can really tend to overlook things because you just don't want to ruffle feathers, or you just, you're just desperate for a relationship. I don't want to say, I hate to use the word desperate, but we are in need of companionship. And I think to act like we're not is to deceive ourselves, right? And so when we have that need, it can cause us to make decisions or to be short-sighted in our sight of things and ignore flags that are glaring and that are there, right? And so I like that she says, remains, if the person does not acknowledge the issue and remains in a defensive, prideful, or dishonest posture, then, intimacy isn't possible at that time. A couple of things I like about that she shared about that. Now, we're talking about pride, right? We're talking about people being resentful, people not willing to own up to their parts in things. Those are all flags. Like, those are all problems. Those are problems. I've had several relationships where that has been the case, and none of them have ended well. None of them. They have all ended. Can I say that we are not currently friends? But none of them have ended well, and it presents a real problem. I mean, even like even if you think of it like in a relationship, a, a romantic relationship, if that person is not self-aware, if that person can't own up, if that person operates in pride, if that person is resentful, all those things are going to pose problems for you guys' relationship. You're not going to be able to effectively communicate. You're not going to be able to be vulnerable. You're not going to be able to be transparent. You're not going to show up as your most authentic self um, because they won't let you. They won't let you to a place where you can grow. Like we're not creating an intimate space where both people can feel safe and both people can grow. And but I also like that she said that at this time, right? So it leaves it open to you being able to circle back. Like once growth takes place, once the individual becomes more aware in that space. Like there are things that, of course, like about myself that I didn't know 20 years ago that I know now. You know, even looking back in my friendships, I can see times when possibly my friends were hurting, even though they weren't transparent with me about their hurting or their feelings of loneliness or their insecurities. Now looking back, I can see, oh, that's what they were dealing with. I wasn't aware. I wasn't even self-aware enough to know that maybe some of my behaviors could have possibly agitated those feelings that they already had, right? But I wasn't aware, you know, I wasn't at that maturity level. I wasn't at that level of sensitivity, right? But I am now. And so we might have, if we were to meet now, we may have a different, you know, relationship or we may show up differently. And so I think that the same thing is true with this person. You know, they may not be at that space right now, but it doesn't mean that they'll never get there. Now I do think the choice becomes yours as to how you want to navigate that friendship or that relationship. You know, do you have the bandwidth to wait for them to possibly get there? And while you're waiting, are you willing to not be able to show up as your most authentic self because they won't accept that because of where they are, you know? And there are some relationship dynamics where you kind of have to be in relationship with people, you know, whether maybe it's like a work thing or a partnership thing or whatever, and you have to be in relationship with people. And so I think having the understanding that this is where they are right now, then you get to choose how you show up in that space. You get to choose how much of yourself you make available to them, right? You get to set your boundaries, right? You get to understand the type of relationship that we're in. I think so often for us, especially as women, we're not aware. We don't pay attention about the type of relationship we're in. We just try to do life with people. And everybody's at different phases of their lives, dealing with different things. And you have the right to choose if you want to be a part of that thing. You absolutely do. So for me, in the situations that I'm thinking about, one in particular, um, you know, we weren't able to have conversations where there was honesty. Like she just was not willing to admit some ways that she felt, even though when I would talk to other people, um, they were kind of like, and they knew they had relationships with her and they knew her. They kind of like confirmed, like, yeah, this is what she's dealing with, like this is what's happening. But that individual did not feel, you know, either was not self-aware or did not feel safe enough with me to be honest or to be transparent, and would continue to operate in a place of pride or resentment or whatever, and would continue to operate in that space as it concerns me. concerned me. And so therefore it created a dynamic where as a result of that, it was a lot of passive aggressive behavior that took me a long time to identify. Like I have been, if y'all have been listening to me for a while, I have been on my therapy journey, trying to get my emotional intelligence a little bit better, because I'm the type of person that like I don't I historically I don't really sit in my emotions a lot, and so things will happen and I'll kind of feel it and keep going. And so that in turn has created in me where I don't necessarily pay attention to a lot of other people's emotional states, right? I kind of just take what you tell me as what is true. And then when you do behaviors that are opposite to what is coming out your mouth, it used to leave me in a confused state. Um, because if I was mad at you, I would just say I was mad at you. Like I don't act like I'm not mad at you. So that has always been challenging for me, right? And so as I've grown in my own emotional intelligence, I've been able to understand people a little bit more. And so, but at that time, I didn't know that, and I wasn't equipped, to show up as that type of person or in that type of relationship. And so that did not work out well. There have been other relationships where, you know, so now as a result of dealing with those things, I now look for certain things. And so when flags show up where, people are unwilling to, what did Amanda say? Let me see what Amanda said. um, People remain defensive. Oh, I've been in that. People just on defense all the time and just like, you know, now you're not just upset about this or have some pushback to give me for this, you got pushback to give me for that, and then I'm just getting pushback all the time, and it really is just because you're on defense, right? And so also like having a dishonest posture, which is like you're not being honest with me. Like the worst thing is like, okay, so we're good. Oh, I'm fine. Oh, that is annoying. I'm fine. I'm good. I'm good. And I'm like, clearly you're not good, but you're not about to tell me that you're not good. You know what I mean? And I mean, I find that a lot in the church. I'm just going to be honest with church people. I find a lot of, no, I'm fine. No, we're okay. We just gonna move forward. Child, ain't nobody move no forward. Ain't nobody okay. Um, Everybody just sitting up here mad and in a dishonest posture, um, because we can't be honest. First of all, I guess with ourselves, and then honestly find the words to communicate to someone else, which really frees us both, right? So when you are able to be honest about how you're feeling, and I'm able to be honest about how I'm feeling, and we're able to come to a place where we both are clear on how each other feels and how each other is looking to progress, I feel like that's healing, even though we may not progress together. Like, I'll never forget, I had somebody be honest with me, okay? Be honest with me. And the honest opinion was like, they wasn't really feeling me. They didn't like me. They went through some reasons and some things that had transpired. And then they were honest with themselves, with the fact that like they know that they're not the type of person that, extends a lot of grace in that area. And that they they just be cutting folks off. That's just how they deal with it, whatever. But as as hurtful, it was hurtful. It didn't feel good, right? It didn't feel good to have somebody say that they don't really like you. Not really, that they don't like you. um, it was freeing because now I'm clear. She was clear. We could stop doing the song and dance. We were still respectful, of each other. Still were able to be in the same space, but we just were clear, like, this is not, you're not willing, this is a deal breaker for you. you not liking me is a deal breaker for me. You know what I mean? So we were clear, and there was a freedom in that. There was a freedom in that. And so, like, I don't walk around in the back of my mind wondering anything. I don't walk around in the back of my mind thinking that I did something, feeling some kind of way. I don't walk like I'm super clear. I'm super clear, you know? And so we're able to, at this point, you know, we don't speak, but we're able to go our separate ways. And at least for me, I have some freedom from that and some resolution, and I'm good. Like I can honestly say that I'm good. Like I'm super clear on like where we are, which is freedom. But there's so many other relationships where people have just not been honest, that it leaves like this little fog or like cloud in the back of your head, where you're not 100%. You're still always kind of like wondering something, and it leaves an uneasiness, which is not freedom, right? So oh yeah, so it says, but it shows larger issues of character such as honesty, self-awareness, wisdom, because wisdom, and maybe that's why, like, you know, as we grow prayerfully, we get wiser. But wisdom will let you know that it's better that I'm honest and I share, and I understand what my limitations are, my deal breakers are, where I am emotionally and mentally, and what I can handle and what I can't, and have those honest conversations with you. Because in the end, it'll lead for a healthier space. And I think that that space allows us to be able to circle back if and when both people are in better spaces. But when you do it the other way, it's really hard to circle back. Like you have just crossed, I think you re-wound people by, you know, pretending. But you're not really pretending, because your aura and your your tone and your face, all that stuff is like really showing, and you're just re-wounding people. Um, so yeah, that is my thoughts on that. But I said not being able to acknowledge imperfection is more damaging, which is really pride, right? Because at the end of the day, none of us are perfect. None of us are perfect. We're all working on something. And I think it's important that we understand that, and we own that, and we have an expectation that people are going to offend, people are going to hurt, but it's how do we move past that? Like, what conversations do we have? What ownership do we take for the things that we've done? And then what things do we release that we had no control over, right? And so the other part of this is where we start, of this reader's guide portion, is where you start asking yourself questions, right? Questions that will help you unearth your issues, because really at the end of the day, people, you can't change how anybody else shows up. You can't change what anybody else does. You can change what you learn from it, how you grow, and how self-aware and authentic you become as an individual, right? You get to choose how you show up in this world. You get to choose how you make up space in this place. That's a rock. That's like rapping, make up space in this place, right? You get to choose. And so she has questions here. She also has scriptures, which can remind us of what we should be doing and what we should be aiming for, right? So one of the questions, are, how comfortable are you letting people know about your struggles, fears, and character flaws? So at this point, I'm like super comfortable. I feel like I talk about it a lot. um, I think that I think I've always kind of talked about, like, if I identify it, I don't have a problem talking about it, right? If I identify it. Um, my key problem, and not problem, but my thing that I want to continuously work on and improve on is identifying them, like being aware enough to tap in enough, being quiet and still enough to understand what's going on with me. Why am I feeling a certain way? Being okay with dealing with feelings of hurt and disappointment, and acknowledging them for what they are. I had something happen, and it wasn't really like a friendship, but it was a relationship. And something happened, and it was just like, oh, really? Like, that's my thing. Really? That's what we gonna do? For real? For real, for real? So, um, and I would just be there. I'll be there. Like, the for real really means I'm not feeling this. I'm not feeling you. I'm not feeling what you're doing. But it's not descriptive of how I feel. And so I sat there, and as soon as I had that feeling, I was like, or that thought, I sat there and I was like, yo, I'm so disappointed in this individual right now. And I sat with that disappointment. I was like, okay, Letitia, feel this disappointment because this is what you're feeling, right? I would skip the feeling of disappointment typically and just move into anger. I'm mad at this. I'm not feeling this, blah, blah, blah. And I could talk about the situation, like what actually happened. But what I used to always skip over was the feeling that it gave me. But I think the power in owning the feeling is allows you to move past it. Right? If you never acknowledge that it's there, then you can't move past it. It's just always holding on. And you're like, you don't even know that it's there, that you're walking around with it. So the feeling was disappointment. And then based on the feeling, um, that made me look deeper, like, okay, so what is disappointing about this? And is this a character thing? Is this leaning into the person's character, or is this like, like a preference? Like, is this leading into a deal breaker for me? And unfortunately, it leans into a deal breaker for me, right? It leans into a deal breaker, and it leans into a character, what I feel is character, you know, um, issues, right? That are deal breakers for me. And so then, um, then it was, then it became, wow, okay. So now I have to revamp like how I move and what I'm going to do and how I'm going to show up, how I show up in this space or in this relationship. And sometimes we're moving so fast. Like, I'll speak for myself. Sometimes I'm moving so fast that I don't do that. I don't do that reflection. I don't do that self-awareness. I don't do that understanding. And then we find ourselves to keep doing stuff, right? Which is really like re-wounding ourselves and re-hurting ourselves and having all these feelings that are just like attaching themselves to us that we're not actually spending time identifying and processing so that we can move forward. Um, but because I took the time when it first happened to process it, well, it really is not when it first happened, but when it happened in a way that it changed something. It changed something for me, right? Changed something for me and changed something in me. But typically I keep going even after that, right? Um, but since I did address that within myself, I was able to take control over how I moved going forward, which now does not allow myself to continuously be in a dynamic that re-wounds me in that way, right? And so I think that that's important. I would say it is important, and it's freedom. It is freedom. It's freedom. It's freedom. Now, on the flip side, oh, let me tell you what the scriptures say, because they did have some scriptures here. I don't want to skip past them. It's 1 Peter 4:8. It says, above all, love each other deeply because love covers a multitude of sins, right? And so I think at the end of that, me being able to identify how I'm going to be showing up, what I'm going to be looking like from my end in this relationship, it allows me to still love you, um, and recognize that we all have flaws, right? We all have flaws. We all have things that we're working on. Um, you might be at a different pace of working on it. You might not even be working on it, but it's okay. It's okay, you know? And this is how I make it okay for me, right? And to be able to keep loving you. Because I think it's it's the repetitiveness for me. It's a repetitiveness of hurt that gets me to a place where it becomes very difficult to love you. But when I catch it in the beginning, it's like, okay, cool. This is an area. Hopefully they're working on it. Let me fall back a lot of steps so that I can still love you. Right. So now I'm not sinning and struggling to love you. Right. Um, So James 5:16, therefore confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. So now I can still pray for you. Cause look, I'm not even gonna sit up here in front. If things keep happening and I keep getting rewounded, it's making it real difficult for a sister girl to be praying for you. So I need to do the things that will allow me to stay in a place where I'm able to do that. I'm able to think good things concerning you, right? Um, and then lastly, Romans 12:9, it says love must be sincere. It helps me do that. It helps me stay in a place where I can be sincere for the love that I have for you. Um, I'm realistic, about how that is going to manifest in our relationship, or in our friendship, but it's still there and it's very sincere, right? So yeah, I told y'all this book was good. Okay. She does a lot of self-reflection. She shares a lot of stories about her relationships and her friendships. And it was just really, really good. Highly recommend the book. Like I said, I listened to the Audible, which is really cool. I'm an Audible girl, so I love the Audibles. Um, and the last thing I would say is it is possible. I want to encourage you. It is possible to have relationships where maybe someone does something that you might feel like, was dishonest or whatever the case may be, and you're able to bring it to them and they're self-aware and authentic enough to hear what you said. They might agree, they may not, but you guys are able to have the conversation and create a safe space where they understand where you are with it, you understand where they are with it, and you still love each other. You know what I mean? You forgive each other, you move forward. I definitely think that the hallmark of a good friendship is someone who's able to be like, man, I never meant to do that. I never meant to do that, or I never meant to make you feel that way. And a friend who's able to respond by, um, I know you didn't, um, and it's okay. You know what I mean? It's okay. I get it. And also able to identify, well, it probably made me feel this way because I'm still struggling with such and such and such and such. You know what I mean? I know that you don't move that way and still love you and keep moving forward, right? And not beat you up and bruise you all along the way. And so it is possible. I have been able to experience those conversations. I have been able to tell someone when they have offended or wounded me, and they have been able to express how it wasn't their intent, but and that they're sorry, and we've been able to move forward. So it's like so possible to be able to have these conversations. I just think it really does matter each individual's level of self-awareness, authenticity, and just where they are, like, where they are in their journey of healing, of understanding, of growing. And so it's okay. My point is, it's okay when you have to let some folks go. There will be folks that you don't have to let go, right? It might take a little work to get to them, but they're there. They're there, and friends make your life fuller. That's all I can say. Friendships make your life fuller. They do. So I want to encourage you. We have one more episode where I'm actually having a conversation with one of my friends, a difficult, and we're talking about a difficult conversation we had to have about our friendship. And so I'm excited to share that, and how we were able to progress through that and work through that. It was cool to have her on. I think I did a podcast episode about when I was gearing up for that conversation. So I'll definitely make reference to that. But it's cool to actually have the person on. And I think it's going to be an awesome example of how you can do it, right? So until next time, guys, continue to do life well and business well. Talk to you later.